Most middle-class families aren't broke because they're careless. They're broke because they're responsible. They built the credit score. They bought the house. They climbed the ladder. They avoided stupid mistakes. And yet 10, maybe 15 years later, they're still one disruption away from stress. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The trap isn't overspending. It's structure. And it's so normal that most people celebrate the very decision that locks them into it. If you want to understand the quiet structural shift that separates stable earners from real wealth builders, stay with me, because what we uncover in Part 4 changes how you look at income, assets, and security forever. Let me begin with something simple. If you feel financially responsible but not financially free, you're not failing. You're likely standing inside a structure you were never taught to question. You did everything you were told to do. Go to school, get the degree, find stable employment, buy a home when you can afford it, contribute to retirement. Don't take crazy risks. That sounds reasonable. In fact, it sounds wise. And on paper, your life probably looks stable. But stability and wealth are not the same thing. You know, a treadmill moves fast. You sweat. Your heart pounds. It feels productive. But you're still in the same room. That's what I call the stability illusion. The stability illusion is when steady income creates the feeling of forward motion. Even if your long-term position hasn't meaningfully changed, it feels like progress because activity is visible. Paychecks hit, bills clear. Accounts fluctuate. Maybe your 401k grows slowly. But here's the quiet question most people avoid. If your income stopped, how long would your lifestyle continue without shrinking? Not your emergency fund, not your retirement account at 65, your current lifestyle. That question makes the illusion uncomfortable because many stable households are completely dependent on continued employment to maintain the image of progress. That's not wealth. That's conditional stability. And conditional stability feels strong until something interrupts it. Let me tell you about two neighbors. Same street, similar homes. Let's say $120,000 a year. Both hardworking, both responsible, both good parents. 10 years pass. One has $90,000 in net worth. The other has close to $800,000. Same decade. Very different outcomes. The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't hustle. It wasn't luck. It was structure. One optimized for lifestyle stability. The other optimized for ownership. We'll go deeper into ownership in a moment. That's where the ownership gap lies. But before we get there, I want you to reflect honestly. Have you ever felt like you're moving, but not advancing? If that resonates, type "stiabrayu" in the comments. Just that word. Not because it's dramatic, but because naming your position is the first step toward changing it. Now here's where this gets subtle. Most middle-class families are not reckless. They're not blowing money at casinos. They're not maxing out credit cards irresponsibly. They're making thoughtful decisions. But thoughtful decisions can still build fragile systems. Here's how. When your monthly obligations rise in proportion to your income, your freedom doesn't increase. It just scales. You make more. You commit more. A slightly better neighborhood. A slightly newer car. A slightly upgraded vacation. Individually, every decision feels reasonable. Collectively, they increase your fixed cost of existence. And once fixed costs rise, risk tolerance falls. You become more dependent on the paycheck, more protective of your position, more cautious about stepping away. You see the trap forming? It's not dramatic. It's quiet. This is why raises often strengthen the stability illusion. A raise should create freedom. But for many households, it creates expanded obligations, which means the system still requires the same level of employment intensity to survive, just at a higher number. Here's a mental model. Imagine two escalators. The first escalator runs only when you're actively climbing. That's income-based living. If you stop climbing, you stop rising. The second escalator moves whether you climb or not. That's asset-based living. It moves slowly at first, almost boring. But over time, it carries you higher without constant effort. Most middle-class earners are sprinting on the first escalator. Very few are deliberately stepping onto the second, and society celebrates the first one. Promotions, titles, salary milestones. Almost nobody applauds quiet asset accumulation, but assets detach survival from employment. And that's the real game. Now, here's the first open loop I want you thinking about. There's one financial milestone most families celebrate. Parents feel proud, banks approve it enthusiastically, friends congratulate it, and that milestone often locks households into decades of fixed obligations that reinforce the stability illusion. We'll examine that carefully, because it's not about avoiding it, it's about understanding its cost. And before we move forward, let me ask you something deeper. If your goal is peace, not status, not comparison, but actual peace, does your current structure provide it? Or does it require constant performance to maintain it? In the next part, we're going to examine what you think you own versus what actually owns you. And once you see that distinction clearly, you won't look at income the same way again. Now, let's step into something most people never slow down to examine. The ownership gap. This is where the quiet divide forms. On the surface, you may feel like you own quite a bit. You own a house, you own a car, you own furniture, you own retirement accounts. But ownership in wealth terms doesn't mean your name is on it. It means it produces income without requiring your labor. That's a different definition. And this is where the middle class trap tightens, because most households focus on earning income, not building income producing assets. That's the ownership gap, the gap between what you control and what pays you. Let me explain it simply. If you stop working tomorrow, what continues to send you money? Not what you could sell, not what might appreciate. What sends you cash? For many stable earners, the answer is very little. That's not a judgment. It's a structural observation. Here's the thing. Your job feels powerful because it funds everything. But your job is not an asset. It's an agreement. An agreement that can change. Companies restructure. Industries shift. Technology replaces roles. Health changes. The income you rely on is conditional. Now compare that to someone who owns shares in businesses, rental property that cash flows, a private business that runs without daily involvement, dividend-producing investments. Those assets are not dependent on one person clocking in. They may fluctuate, they may slow down, but they are not tied to one employer's decision. That's the structural difference. Let me tell you about a simple contrast. Two friends graduate in the same year. Both build careers. Both reach 130,000 in annual income by their mid-30s. The first focuses on lifestyle milestones. He upgrades apartments, buys the car he always wanted, maxes out retirement contributions, which is good, but everything else flows into living well. The second lives slightly below his means, not extreme, just intentional. Instead of upgrading lifestyle with every raise, he purchases small ownership stakes, index funds, a duplex property, eventually a small equity position in a private business opportunity. 10 years later, the first friend has a solid lifestyle but still needs the job. The second friend has $35,000, $50,000 a year arriving from assets, not enough to fully retire, but enough to breathe, enough to negotiate, enough to take risk. That's the ownership gap closing. And here's what makes this powerful. Ownership compounds. Income does not. If you earn $150,000 this year, you start at zero again next year. You must earn it again. But if you own assets that grow and reinvest, last year's effort continues working. That's the quiet escalator I mentioned earlier. Now I want to introduce a rule you'll hear me repeat. The earned income ceiling. There is a natural ceiling to how much you can personally earn through labor. You have limited hours, limited energy, limited negotiating leverage. Even highly paid professionals eventually hit a plateau. But ownership has no built-in ceiling. A business can expand beyond your hours. Investments can grow beyond your effort. That's why wealthy families obsess over ownership percentages, not salaries. Let me ask you something direct. What percentage of your monthly income comes from assets instead of effort? Pause on that. Because that number tells you where you stand structurally. And here's where the subtle danger comes in. The middle class often feels asset rich because of home equity. But home equity doesn't pay you. It sits. It may appreciate. It may protect you from rent inflation. But unless it's producing cash flow, it doesn't detach your survival from work. Again, I'm not saying home ownership is bad. I'm saying we confuse possession with production. That confusion widens the ownership gap. Now think about this. If two people both are 120,000, but one has $0 in income producing assets and the other has 40,000 per year in asset income, which one is more financially resilient? The second person could lose their job and still operate at 2/3 lifestyle capacity. The first drops to zero. That's not about intelligence. It's about structure. And here's something most people miss. Closing the ownership gap does not require massive income. It requires priority. Remember the stability illusion. When income rises, lifestyle rises. But if instead asset allocation rises first, everything changes. Even 10-20% of income directed consistently toward ownership creates long-term leverage. It feels slow at first, almost boring. But compounding doesn't look impressive in year 1. It looks powerful in year 10. Let me give you a mental picture. Imagine 2 buckets. Bucket A is lifestyle spending. Bucket B is ownership. Every raise pours water into your system. Most people automatically enlarge bucket A. Very few deliberately expand bucket B first. Over time, bucket B is what fills the second escalator. And once that escalator moves, your dependence on employment decreases quietly. This is why some people look calm during economic uncertainty. It's not because they're fearless. It's because their survival is not 100% tied to their job. That's ownership. And here's the uncomfortable connection. The ownership gap widens fastest during your highest earning years, because that's when lifestyle upgrades are most tempting. Which brings us to the third retention anchor, the lifestyle gravity rule. Income rises, lifestyle expands, obligations increase. Freedom stalls. In the next part, we're going to examine why lifestyle naturally expands with income and why almost nobody resists it. Because once you understand lifestyle gravity, you'll finally see why earning more has not translated into feeling free. Now let's talk about something that feels normal, but quietly shapes your entire financial future. The lifestyle gravity rule. Gravity is invisible. You don't see it working. You just experience its pull. Lifestyle works the same way. When income rises, lifestyle rises with it, almost automatically. Not because you're reckless, not because you're irresponsible, because improvement feels justified. You worked harder. You earned the raise. You deserve something better. And here's the subtle shift. At first, your upgrades feel optional. A slightly nicer apartment, a better car, more convenience, fewer inconveniences. But over time, optional becomes standard. Standard becomes expected. Expected becomes required. That's gravity. Let me give you a simple example. You get a $15,000 raise. On paper, that should increase your financial margin. But instead of expanding ownership, you upgrade. Your rent increases by $600 a month. Your car payment rises by 3 to 5. Insurance ticks up. Dynamic expands. Subscriptions multiply quietly. Suddenly, the raise is absorbed. Your lifestyle improved. Your freedom did not. This is the lifestyle gravity rule. Expenses expand to absorb income unless ownership is prioritized first. And gravity strengthens over time because lifestyle upgrades often come with fixed commitments. A bigger home means higher mortgage taxes, maintenance. A private school means multi-year tuition. A finance car locks in payments. Each commitment reduces flexibility. Flexibility is wealth's quiet partner. Without flexibility, you can't take calculated risks. You can't step back. You can't pivot. You must protect income at all costs. And when protecting income becomes the primary objective, ownership takes a back seat. Now here's something important. Lifestyle gravity doesn't feel dangerous when the economy is strong, it feels earned. But when uncertainty enters, layoffs, downturns, industry shifts, gravity becomes weight because high fixed costs reduce your ability to adapt. Let me ask you something honestly. What happened to your last raise? Did it meaningfully increase your asset base? Or did it mostly upgrade your lifestyle? There's no shame in the answer, but the pattern matters. Here's the deeper insight. Lifestyle upgrades are socially rewarded. New house photos, new car compliments, visible progress. Asset accumulation is quiet. No one congratulates you for increasing your brokerage account allocation. No one applauds you for delaying a purchase. So gravity has social reinforcement, and ownership requires internal discipline. That's why so few people escape the middle class treadmill even when income grows. They're climbing faster, but the treadmill speed increases too. And this connects directly back to the ownership gap. because the faster lifestyle expands, the harder it becomes to redirect income toward assets. High obligations demand stable employment. Stable employment reinforces the stability illusion, and the cycle repeats. Income rises, lifestyle rises, dependency rises. But here's the key shift if you reverse the order: ownership first, lifestyle second, gravity weakens. You still upgrade, you still enjoy life, but upgrades happen after assets are secured. That single sequencing decision changes everything. In the next part, we'll talk about how to structurally reverse gravity without living like a monk, and how to build ownership in a way that quietly detaches your survival from your salary. So how do you reverse gravity without shrinking your life? You don't escape the middle class trap by earning less. And you don't escape it by extreme frugality. You escape it by changing sequence. This is what I call the ownership priority principle. Ownership first, lifestyle second, not someday, not when you feel ready. First, most households do this backwards. They decide the lifestyle they want, then see what's left for investing. Wealth builders reverse it. They decide what percentage of income goes to ownership automatically before lifestyle expands to consume it. That single shift changes the entire trajectory. Here's a practical example. Imagine you earn $140,000 a year. Instead of asking, "What house can I afford?" you ask, "What ownership position must I build every year?" Maybe that means maxing retirement accounts, building a taxable investment portfolio, accumulating dividend-producing assets, investing in a small business or cash flow property. Only after that allocation is secured do you design lifestyle. Notice what this does psychologically. It reframes income. Income is no longer for upgrading identity. It's for purchasing future freedom, and freedom compounds. Over time, asset income starts covering small expenses, then larger ones. Eventually, it covers necessities. That's when pressure decreases. That's when decisions improve. You negotiate differently at work. You evaluate risk differently. You sleep differently, because survival is no longer tied 100% to your employer. And here's the calm truth. You don't need millions to feel this shift. You need margin. You need assets that produce enough to create options. In the final part, we'll bring this together, and I'll show you how small, consistent ownership decisions in your 30s and 40s quietly reshape your entire financial future by the time most people realize they waited too long. Now let's pull all of this together and see the long view. Most people live in the moment. They measure success by their paycheck or the visible upgrades in their lifestyle. But wealth, real wealth, is not measured by what you can spend today. It's measured by the options you create for tomorrow. That's the quiet power of compounding ownership. Remember the rules we've been building: the stability illusion, the ownership gap, and the lifestyle gravity rule. When you combine them with ownership priority, something subtle but profound happens. Your life shifts from reacting to circumstances to shaping them. Income becomes a tool, not a tether. Expenses no longer define freedom. They support a life designed intentionally. Let's consider a practical picture. If you begin in your 30s or 40s, allocating even 15-20% of income toward assets first, while letting lifestyle grow slowly, by your 50s you could have multiple streams of passive income. Not enough to retire overnight, but enough to negotiate your career, take calculated risks, or step back temporarily without panic. That's compounding patience in action. And this is the calm, almost invisible advantage most middle-class earners overlook. While friends are upgrading homes and cars, reinvesting slowly into ownership quietly accelerates freedom. It's not dramatic, but it's consistent. Snowballing slowly, like a well-built asset portfolio rolling downhill, it eventually gains momentum that becomes nearly unstoppable. Here's the point: wealth is not an event, it's a process. Stability alone feels comfortable, but it doesn't create freedom. Ownership prioritized first builds security and independence, even if lifestyle continues to rise gradually. You can enjoy life now, but you're also planting seeds that your future self will thank you for. Take a moment and reflect. Are your decisions building income or just maintaining comfort? The answer determines whether you remain in the middle-class treadmill or quietly step onto the escalator of true financial independence. If this perspective reshaped how you view your financial future, Share ONNR in the comments and take one small action today to prioritize assets over lifestyle. In the closing, we'll summarize the 3 anchors and how to implement them consistently for decades of advantage.